Welcome back to Untold Physio Stories. I'm your host, Dr. E. This is our podcast with crazy physio failures, interesting cases, and more from rehab pros all around the world. Today, I have Mike Eisenhart joining me. Mike and I met on my podcast many years ago. Some of you guys may have listened to it. It was called Therapy Insiders with Dr. Gene Chirac-Abrad, myself, and Dr. Joe Palmer. And when I interviewed Mike that long ago, I basically just thought he was like the nutritional plant-based PT guy, athlete. I didn't realize that he had this whole other brand and that was just part of it. And then, I saw him post on LinkedIn where he reached out to me and said, hey, I am having trouble kind of filling a position. So that's when I realized there's this whole other thing to Mike and his company. And why don't you give a quick background, Mike, and tell the story of how you formed it or any kind of interesting stories you got from proactivity?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be back with you. That was many years ago, and that was such a funny thing for me to think. Like the biggest part of what we do was the part that got missed. So, long story short, proactivity has always been in the business of prevention. Really since the very, very beginning of our practice. I started my practice with my sister in 1998, 99. And within a year, I sort of knew that I wasn't going to be in the clinic. That was sort of like the only thing I learned in the first 6 months of owning a practice was me in the clinic on the long term wasn't going to work out. I found my pathway toward employers, and this was kind of before there were direct to employer models or it was cool to talk about population health. This was like in the trenches, awful work, construction workers early in the morning. And the basic idea was, boy, if we could get ahead of some of these problems, if we could help people by getting ahead of some of their risks, we could keep them pain free, keep them functioning, and sort of keep them strong over the long term. That resonated with me completely as a professional, and it just made good sense. And although at the time prevention was sort of like a four-letter word in the world of PT, like we can't prevent things, we've now come so far into realizing that healthy lifestyle and health overall can be impacted by what we do every day. So yeah, for 26 years, we've been building a practice that focuses primarily on that, and we work with large employers to do so. And it's awesome work, and it's fun, and it's challenging, and it's very, very different than most people's vision of PT.
I agree. Because when Mike reached out to me and I said, oh yeah, let's do a webinar. And do you have any positions available in Buffalo? Because I think I'd be interested in a part-time. And there was a position, and I accepted. So I don't know if you guys saw. We haven't. I don't know if it's been officially mentioned on LinkedIn, but or that you guys made the social media post. But I did join Proactivity, and it is not like what I think. Actually, I'll probably be posting today on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram about it. And the title will be "Oh, the places you go, or the things you will see." Like the
Yeah,
Dr.
right
Seuss
on.
book. Because yeah, you don't. I don't expect as a PT to be wearing like I just kind of thought of it, hey, I'm gonna have like a table in a warehouse or something. I didn't imagine that it really would be primary and preventative. And when you talk about being embedded in the population, we think, how do you prevent things? You prevent things over the long term. You know, you do it educational piece after educational piece after educational piece. You lead stretching sessions, you give them nutritional information, any kind of movement prevention. You're there, of course, for triage and for treatment, but that is probably the least part. I mean, how do you prevent things over time with just a lot of little nuggets? I just feel like you're just giving them slight nuggets of information to slowly change behavior. Because you talk to a group of people who you're trying not to say, "Hey, this is how I want you to do your job." Um, some people are curious and some people are not. But luckily, I've been mentored by Dr. Mark Ciolik, and he's a rock star at the job. He actually loosened the pickle jar lid for me. I mean, because every time I do an educational piece in front of like 18 mechanics, I would say only two of them are, kind of giving me a hard time or not standing up or not moving. And, maybe one of Mark's flyers got made into a paper airplane and thrown at me, but I kind of expected that stuff. And the rest of the people, I mean, the rest of the people are just they're curious. And, maybe not everyone wants to move and I get some moans and groans, but I would say 95% are engaged, and I wouldn't have wanted to start this cold, like, hey, I'm coming in and for a pilot project. So I don't know. Do you have any crazy stories about like changing behaviors or what have you
Oh,
seen over the years? Because I've heard
man.
some
I
great
mean,
stats from Amy.
so many, right? I mean, so many. That's like it is. It's wild. I mean, the evolution over time has been super cool. When we first started, people were outright resistant. I mean, it was sort of hostile territory in a sense. You're going in so this is in the late '90s, early 2000s, and I mean, in general, people still didn't believe these basic nuggets that you're talking about. Like this wasn't common knowledge. So when we were talking about things like your smoking habit as it relates to your pain, like that was off the wall. Like that was a concept that wasn't well documented or proven, and inflammatory diets and how that might relate to your aches and pains. And people very much still believed in this idea of like, well, if I lift that heavy thing, I'm going to strain something. And certainly we know that that's a factor without a doubt, but there's this whole person that we're dealing with and these sort of overall systems. And so yeah, in the early years, it was wild. I mean, just things that we saw in good and bad. I mean, things that blew our mind and helped us to kind of realize like what an impact you can make. I mean, the first time somebody comes up to you and, very heartily looks you in the eye and says, "You changed my life." It's powerful. And it's like, how could I have done that with that simple conversation or that little interaction, as you said, over the long term? And so the model itself lends itself to that. And it's like you're building these deep relationships and you're talking about people's lives and what matters in real life. And we're not pressured for time. So like if I'm going to spend 10 minutes talking to you today because we have that time, like great. But I'm going to do that every month for the next 10 years. We're going to get somewhere, and so now people start to build like some autonomy and some, agency over their health, and they start to believe they can control these things. And that's awesome. So yeah, I mean, geez, the first time I saw something was New Brunswick, New Jersey. And I've told this story before, but it was really impactful for me. So when you're in industry, and I'm sure you'll see this, you walk in sometimes and on like the bathroom doors, there's something that posts and says like, "Hey, we're going to go all out and have a drink with Bob. He's retiring," And so in New Brunswick, New Jersey, it was a gas construction facility. So really heavy work, tough on the body. And it was exactly that. Like we're all going to go out and, to the pub and have a beer with Bob. He's retiring. And I was there on a once a month basis. So I was there, I saw that, I came back a month later, and Bob had retired. I came back another month later, and it was, "We're so sorry about the passing of Bob." And that was the difference in the science. It was literally 60 days. This guy had worked his entire life for that moment, and you talk to real people, it's like, look, I'm working so that I can put enough money aside and retire and live a healthy life and, fund my kids' college education, like things that really matter. And then he finally got there. And 60 days later, like that was it. And that just was atrocious to me. Like that was like, I couldn't, like that wasn't okay. That wasn't like we had failed him. Healthcare providers overall had failed this guy if he was walking out the door in retirement, and that was sort of the end of his life. And I don't know all the specifics of it, but that stunned me. And I was a very young provider, I was 20 something years old, 25 years old. And it just stuck with me that, wow, like we could have changed that arc. And I mean, we spent a lifetime doing it. Now on the flip side, we put our 25 for 25, 25 stories on LinkedIn of 25 years of this. So there's 25 good stories if anybody wants to see it. Go on LinkedIn to the proactivity page and you'll see some really wild stuff. But we
Gotta
put
give me
that
that
out.
link so I can stick it in the show notes.
Yeah, I totally will. Yeah. So we put that out there this year just to kind of commemorate 25 years, mostly just because 25 years is a long time to be in practice, right? As you know. So that basic idea was out there. I got a phone call. I was literally sitting like on my couch at home and my cell phone rings and it's a number that I haven't seen in I don't even know how many years. And this is somebody who called me from, he's long since retired from an employer that we worked with. We had a really close relationship with him. And he called me and he said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that I think about you often and you had a major impact on my life." Now, the story he tells is that Justin, our colleague Justin, saved his life. That's the way that he phrases it, is, Justin saved my life. And the reason why was because Justin helped him with his knee. And this guy was a, long-term habitual runner. And he was in a high-stress situation, a high-stress job, and he couldn't run because his knee was bothering him. And it was affecting his mental health. And he's the first one to tell you, like, this was having a major impact on my mental health. And Justin helped me in my office one day to get my knee resolved and get me back out on the road. And as far as he tells it, he's convinced that changed the trajectory of his life, maybe saved his life. Like, you hear stories like that, it's like, man, we have a massive impact if we're in the right place at the right time with the right folks. And so that's what we've tried to build, just take the barriers down and get where the people are, and you can really make some change.
Yeah, I like when I did the webinar, it was actually before I started with you guys. I had already signed on, but I didn't start. And I didn't really, the embedding thing, again, I just pictured it as a PT clinic inside. But I mean, we actually, where I am, there is no PT clinic, I mean, we walk around with a table and we do triage and we do these little 10, 15-minute treatments, which actually works perfect for the way I approach people, because it's kind of like when I see people in church or I see a family friend or like, hey, what about my shoulder or this or that? Then I just like do a quick assessment, give them a couple of resets, and eight times out of 10, they're happy with like the amount of resets that I gave them. Or even if someone sees me in a gym or, I don't have time, but it's perfect for that. But yeah, I mean, even on my first day with Mark, there was a guy who Mark had been talking to, and he's like, yeah, every single one of my brothers has died at 55 of a major heart attack. We've all had high cholesterol and everything. And he's like, my doctor just took my blood pressure last week, and the diastolic was like, I don't even remember. I was just like, I think it was like 120 or 130. And I was like,
yeah.
And he said, oh, my doctor said, I'll monitor it like once a month, And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
So it's these little suggestions like, well, we take it. It's still crazy high diastolic. And then, this is a simple suggestion of he's already changing his diet. He's already like being made fun of in the lunchroom because he's bringing in carrots.
It's a good sign.
And he turned down all the cake that someone had brought in for someone's birthday. So, he was already there.
Sure.
But the fact that his primary had said like, yeah, let's just monitor that was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, because I left that day without even being sure that I wanted to. That was just my observation day before I really like started with you guys. I just thought, I've been asking about him ever since, because he actually moved from there. I haven't seen him yet, but he moved into like management, like a higher position. So I think he's like not necessarily as stressed, but or maybe it's more stressful. I don't know. But it's a simple suggestion of, I think you need to follow up with more with that, or see a different doctor, or go see a cardiologist or something, because he's already making those little lifestyle changes, recognizing that he needs to change before what happened to all his brothers happens to him. Yeah. And that's when I thought, wow, this is so powerful, because we often complain about being tertiary providers, or how can we get even more of the patients that see the chiropractor or something like that, or the massage therapist, or more of a direct access. But I mean, really being embedded in them and seeing these people day after day after day, following up with them, even for 10 or 15 minutes every other week. Every time I follow up with someone, whether it's wellness or just for, a simple MSK issue, I just set my calendar, hey, follow up with this person in 2 weeks. Or, if I'm ever in like their area, if I'm in like the maintenance area, I just like search them out and follow up with them. Like, hey, how's this going? Or how's your sleep? Or, have you started with more fiber? Have you stuck to the outside of the grocery store instead of the inside? Those are all the little things I tell my patients, but I feel like it's not as impactful, because when I discharge my patients, These people, like, they can't get rid of me.
That's right.
So it's great.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes that's it, right? Is that idea of like, well, hey, I'll see you next week, or I'll see you next month. Like, that creates some level of accountability. And just as you said, I mean, it's those little things that really go a long way. That idea of no, sir, you are in hypertensive crisis. We need a little bit more than the occasional check-in.
I was flabbergasted. And Mark's like, oh, these small town docs. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, this guy's like, he lives in Niagara Falls. I wouldn't call it like a small town doc, but yeah.
And you'd be surprised. Like, we see both extremes, I mean, sometimes we see any little thing go off and people are like, sucked right into the flume of the healthcare system and medications and procedures. And then other sides, it's sort of like, nothing, like, hey, let's watch and wait. And our job, I think, is to sort of be in the middle and help people translate. And
Yeah.
I think that's really what it is like you're an advocate, you're an asset on the ground. If nothing else, you understand the language, you have enough knowledge to guide people and give them some tips and thoughts, and then hand them back the controls. Like, okay, look, you are flying this thing. I'm your co-pilot maybe, but like we're going to get you where you need to go. But there's a lot to it. It is complex. It's easily to get confused when it comes to health and healthcare. So yeah, like that navigator concept seems to work. And just as you said, that little consult that we all do every day of our life for family and friends. Like, I mean, if you're a PT, once the word gets out, you know how it goes. Somebody's texting you or calling you, and you're giving them that little 15-minute, what we would call mini clinic or mini consult. Like that's a model of care, and we know it works. Like you can sort of, hey, try a few of these things. I'll check in with you. Let me know how it goes. Like that can work if we catch things sort of early. When we're catching things really, really late and you're in that tertiary role, like, no, now you need to roll up your sleeves and get to work treating something and kind of unwinding it. Our basic premise is that, boy, if I can be right there when you need me, it's easier for me. Like I don't have to work as hard. Like I'm going to get that result pretty quickly because I only need to do one thing, not five things.
Right.
And I can still walk you back. And so, yeah, like it's really just, there's this old saying, and I say it a lot, give the laziest person the hardest job and you'll find the easiest way to do it. Well, I'm the hero in that story. I'm the laziest person, right? And so like our practice is essentially like, let's make it administratively easy to affect change. And when you do that, you realize like it's much easier for me to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and be standing where I need to be when I need to be there than it is for me to wait for you to come in the door, with all sorts of layers that I now have to work through.
That has been an adjustment. Waking
Oh,
up
not,
two
not a
days a
morning
week
guy.
at like 5 a.m., driving 50 minutes to an undisclosed place because the entire client, I realize now, is like a HIPAA thing.
Sure.
It's not just the person, the entire client is. So my kids find out I did confined space training. I don't know if you ever watched the movie or the documentary The Rescue. Have you ever seen that?
I don't think I have.
Well, you probably remember it. Like, remember when all those like 15 Thai soccer players got trapped in that cave and the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
world was like
Yeah.
watching, and Elon Musk was like, I'm gonna build a sub, and
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know. I
remember
remember the
that?
story.
Yeah, it's a great. I mean, you need to watch the documentary. You absolutely. It is one of like humanity's greatest recent achievements because like the whole world came together to save these kids, right?
That's awesome.
So they're talking about when they finally find the kids after X amount of days. They're like, oh, the room was a little stale because they had been trapped for at least 14 days at this point, um, with just water. And they were like, oh, I pull up my O2 meter and it's 15%. And they're like, it's not compatible typically with life,
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, yeah, in my confined space training, I just learned that it has to be between 19.5 and 23.5%. And my kids are also like, where are you working? Where are you working? I'm like, I can't say, guys. I can't say. One of my oldest daughters like, you're doing like confined space training? Like, why do you know these percentages? She's in university already. And she's
Sure.
like, what are you, a spy or something
Yeah,
now? Like,
exactly.
why can't you? I'm like, no, it's not exactly that fancy. But yeah, I never thought I'd learn about, would be wearing a hard hat and safety glasses and fire retardant clothing to work. But it is an amazing opportunity. And I think Mike, actually, if you guys think this is interesting, if you think that if you want to really be preventative and make a difference and potentially save someone's life. I mean, we've all been told we've saved someone's lives because of, like Justin's example, right? Like the knee pain for sure. And that's mentally, that's great. But I mean, could we have saved this guy's life by telling him, hey, you need to like do a little bit more than just monitor this? If you've ever wanted to do that or make these little changes in people's lives that make an overarching change in not only a life, but an entire population of workers, I think Mike has an opportunity for you. You want to tell him about it?
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, that's one of our greatest problems and historically has been is getting the PTs to understand what these opportunities are. And I mean, we have them. I mean, at this point, 26 years later, I think we're in, I don't know, 10 or 12 different states. And, we've got contracts of every kind and type. And our number one problem is finding really good, adventurous PTs who are willing to get out of their routine and rut and try, just like you did, like put yourself out there and see. Because almost always people are like surprised and delighted like with the model. They may not want to do it all the time or full time. Like it may not be what they see as their career path, for every hour of the day. But almost always it's a refreshing, nice thing. Yeah. So like for example, right now the opportunity you're talking about is in South Carolina, which is probably like a crown jewel gem of an assignment. It's in South Carolina, which we're talking here in the Northeast, which seems like a stretch for people who have sort of roots laid down in an area, but this is the full model. I mean, they are working in heavy fabrication. They're working with a population of around 500 people and their families. So this becomes part of like family healthcare. They have a beautiful clinical space where they actually treat. They just literally built us a new gym space with fully furnished equipment, and and we're going to have this opening in the next 6 months. So we're always looking to expand our team. The Northeast is where our heaviest need and footprint usually is, but this particular opportunity, and that's kind of what started this conversation between us, is it's too good to not be out there sort of pushing. This is not a job. This is like an amazing opportunity to work in a great place. So yeah, I mean, for us, we sort of look at it as, in an ideal world, someday we'll have this army model, where like the army kind of puts you somewhere, lets you learn, you develop your skills, and then you bring this to your whatever hometown when you retire. That's our hope, and that South Carolina opportunity is exactly that. We've had 2 or 3 PTs who are now in other areas of the country for us, kind of holding down and building, who started there, and it's been a great one. So it's going to come up again soon, 6 months, I think. January, I think, is when we're officially looking to place somebody. And in fairness, I mean, we might fill it from inside our own team. I know I have people who are in the Northeast who realize what a great place that is, and we're saying like, no, you can't leave the Northeast. We need you where you are. I need you in New York City. You can't go down, to the sunny South. But yeah, the opportunities are really everywhere. I mean, the wild thing is we've never really marketed. Like, as funny as that sounds, like we're not out there really marketing and selling our services. Most of the time it's companies telling other companies who then say, yeah, we need this for our people too. And it makes sense. It works. And more PTs should be doing it.
Sure, it's more than just like the gym. I would say level one would be our corporation has a gym that no one uses. And level two
Right.
is there's a PT that just gives out, like, it's still just PT in a gym. It's not really preventative. It's still tertiary care in the gym. So yeah, if you guys find this interesting, please reach out to Mike or me for more information. I can also tell you stories. I've only been doing a month, but I'm really excited. It is absolutely out of my wheelhouse, and it's in and out of my wheelhouse for sure. But it's been really exciting so far. So again, thanks for the opportunity. And if you guys think it's a cool story, please rate Untold Physio Stories 5 stars wherever you listen to podcasts, especially Apple and Spotify. That goes for you, Mike. I'll send you a link. And that helps our discoverability. And as always, you guys have a great day.
Thanks so much.